Hey everyone, I'm going to run through our lecture for today that we would have technically done this morning, which is on user flow. So user flow, obviously we'll get into it, but in a nutshell, it's any little menu, anything that you need to touch upon on your website. So a site map, site architecture, etc. So user flow is the path taken by a typical user on a website or app to complete a task. The user flow takes them from their entry point through a set of steps towards a successful outcome and final actions such as purchasing a product. So a user flow helps the designer map out their path or paths a user needs to take to accomplish a task. So where do we start and where do we finish? The user flow will show the user's movement throughout every step they need to take, from landing on a page to their final interaction. So with most web products, there are many ways a user can obviously navigate through a product. Usually it's not just, one step to the next step. There's usually a few ways you can navigate to, say, your shopping cart through a website. So creating a chart that depicts the user's entry into the product up until their exit helps designer understand, analyze, and improve a user experience. The benefits of this translates into more conversations with you and your client if things work, if they were missing things, etc. So user flow chart diagram, etc., can get very detailed. Even the smallest of app or website could have quite a detailed sitemap, because perhaps one page you're able to navigate from lots of different areas. So we always want to keep that in mind, especially if we're trying to get people to, for instance, shop. We always kind of want to, lack of better terms, hit them over the head with ways to get to the shop. So great reasons to use user flows. So one is to make your web product more intuitive. The biggest reason to utilize user flows is to create pathways that the user only needs to concentrate on their progress and not get lost or daunted in the process of other things. There's usually more than one way to accomplish a task, and allowing the user to move freely in the product, the more chance of them converting into money, dollars, sales. So this also helps fix existing problems. So in many cases, clients feel their web product is broken because of a low conversion rate. So people drop off once they perhaps maybe add to cart, maybe because they can't figure out how to proceed to checkout. So fixing the interface and the point to where the user stalls in the process is key to making the most out of a web product. And in saying this comes with generally several iterations. So lots of testing, lots of start and stopping. Okay, how about we try this, etc. Obviously, then we make the client happy. So a user flow diagram or charts allows client stakeholders to get a big picture of the interface and how it works, helping those involved see how users will be successful in getting to the point of purchase, sign up, etc. Gets the client and stakeholders excited for the next stage of the process. So what are some of the types? So a user flow chart, diagram, infographics, etc. can take on many looks depending on the stage of the project is at. Just like anything, we start with a very rough version, and then as we progress through our process, things get a little more refined. So a task-based diagram. So task-based diagram depicts the tasks that are asked of the user early on in the process. Most often, layout of the actual screens has no occurred at this point. Then we have a wire-based diagram. So a wire-based diagram displays the layout of each screen that a user will be faced with. So obviously more of a wireframe process with some connecting lines, so we know where everything is going. This type of diagram depicts exactly what the interface element, the user will be interacting with to move on through the process. How to create a user flow in those 4 steps. So we identify our objectives: more sales, adding to cart, get people shopping, etc. Identify the ways that the user enters your web product. How do they go about doing that? Where's the shopping button? Is there a shop now button on every single page? Identifying the content the users need throughout the process. And then we create that user flow diagram from all of those kind of final decisions. So when we identify the objectives, we figure out what the end goal of the user is. What do we want the user to do? What does the client want the user to do? And then we answer these questions, or answering these questions will help with understanding the process the user needs to go through and achieve that final goal. Identify the way the user enters your web product. So do they click on an ad? Is there an organic web search? Typing in a final URL from social media, email campaign, different buttons. And knowing how the user enters your product helps determine what screen they'll land on. Determining where they move from a start page, a landing page to a product page, offers insight in helping them navigate through a task. For the most part, you generally land on a home page. But say if it's an app, there might be an onboarding screen to start with. Remember that from Visual Web. And then when we identify the content the user needs, the users need throughout the process. So now that they're here, how can they act on the offer? So what actions do they need to convert? What do they need to see on each screen? How do we make the process familiar / easy? Making it easy for the user to see the offerings, choose options, go through the checkout. Always is making that as easy as possible is key. Show only the content they need to see wherever possible. So clouding it with too many things or hiding it in an inconspicuous area would be obviously a no-go there. And then when we create our diagram, you have lots of information now to start mapping things out. Make sure the labels used for each step of the process is easy to read and obviously in a familiar language. Anything like, instead of it calling a shopping cart, we call it a buy bag, and you're like, buy bag, does that? So you always want to make sure things are always clear. We're always thinking about accessibility. Lots of easy tools out there. Miro is a great one to design sitemaps. You can also use InVision, which several of you have kind of used recently and are probably growing a little bit more comfortable with as time goes on. So we make the diagram or chart look like a designer touched it. So we always want to make sure it looks good. We do not want that to look messy. So our user journey map is an infographic, essentially depicting the interactions that a user has with the web product. It also illustrates the emotions, pain points, and success the user has through the process. For instance, if they get through a process and they need to get back to step 2, is there a way for them to go back to step 2, or are they going to have to go all the way to the beginning? A user journey allows the designer to visualize a web product from the user's perspective at every part of their flow through the process of accomplishing their tasks. So you can see everything straight there. Sometimes it's hard to figure it out when we're just thinking about a menu bar on mobile or a menu bar on our desktop designs. When we actually see and lay out those screens, it becomes a little more clear of how and where they can navigate. So 6 steps in creating a user journey map. So we define our process, determine the part of the process will be identified. The entire process could be the focus or just part of the focus. So for instance, the login forms, as you guys are so familiar with now. And then we identify our users. So work with an actual user of the potential project. Working with the CEO of a product is always great and obviously always needed, but we always want to make sure that we work with your actual user. Knowing the type of users of a product or service helps with mapping out the journey. If it's going to be for 70 years old plus, you'll probably outline things one way. If it's for 20 to 30, it's going to be probably outlined another way. So you folks know by now, knowing your target audience is key. Have a goal for the user, so make sure the user is aware of what is expected. Be clear about the scenario that they're working with. So for instance, order sushi from a meal delivery company, purchase great track pants and get free shipping, etc. So we always want to make sure we know what is needed. Identify the user's motivation. So through every touch point in the process, what motivates the user to move on to the next step? Ask the user the reason why they moved on or bailed on that process. And then identify any stumbling blocks or pain points on their journey. Again, for instance, adding something back into the cart. So if I'm ordering some food and I order a hamburger with French fries and I just add it to cart and go. And then I realize I forgot to add my toppings. Being able to click back is, again, as I mentioned that earlier, is key. So we always want to note that, because those are things that sadly get missed often. Always recording motion. So collecting our verbal and nonverbal data, record the user's emotional state. This obviously helps that, as we've learned through our roller coaster challenges, having empathy for our users and really noticing their body language and their facial expressions are key. Then we map out and analyze. So create an infographic that identifies all aspects of the flow. Create a timeline of steps in a process, the user's emotions at each step, and then suggest improvements based on that. And then we do another iteration. So a user flow versus a user journey. So we know that a user flow focuses on the process of that web product. A user journey focuses on the user's experience of that product, how they felt, etc. So those two UX deliverables are often confused with each other. Obviously, incredibly and very much linked, but still two different things. So a team user flow. So this focuses on the path the user takes to get through the process. It's easy to understand. And pardon me, it helps visualize the entire flow through a product. When we talk about a team user journey, this focuses on the experience for the user during the process, uncovers the pain points, focuses on the different parts of the product. So at the back-end interface versus the actual shopping cart. So, and then we talk about the winner. Both seem to deliver the same process and pathway through the web product. So both try to make it easier to navigate. That's why I'm mentioning they're both obviously very connected and very important. Either or both could be created depending on what the goal of the product is. And essentially it's a tie.